Hi, I'm Hannah, your behavior analyst, and today you're on the Spero podcast. And this episode or show is the show. And sometimes I have guests and sometimes I don't. And this is just me today. So it's going to be a little bit of shorter episode. And uh, my fellow co host who likes to join me every once in a while, she is on vacation. So we're going to go let her have some fun. But today's show is going to be geared again more towards behavior analysts, BCBAs. And we're gonna talk about something. We've talked on the show a lot about toxic workplaces from a behavior analytics standpoint, and we'll do some more episodes on that as I have more people to talk to because I think it's a little more fun when you hear stories about other people. But I've been on a lot of Facebook groups with other behavior analysts, and a lot you have the newly minted BCBAs. You have is what we call when people are new in the field. Then you have the people who there's so many different groups. I probably even haven't found them all. And I'm noticing similar questions across the board. And I wanted to see if I could address some of them. And I was writing things down, trying to get ready to like, what am I going to talk about to what would be most helpful? And I remember this one question really stuck out to me. And somebody goes, how do I do my rates as a behavior analyst? They're transitioning from a clinical person to running a business. Now, if you want to switch from a BCBA from clinical to OBM, organizational behavior management, we talked about how you can get into that last time. And I can dig into more of that, but I was thinking about this question, and for some reason it just stuck out. How do I set my rates? I think we're asking the wrong question. And then there's another thing that keeps coming up. I noticed a lot. People talk a lot about, well, how do I handle insurance? How do I deal with insurance? How do I bill for insurance? I don't see very many clinical questions from clinicians. I see a lot of business questions. And I met with somebody who has been in the field for like years and years and years. And she said one of the reasons that ABA agencies are not successful is because they're being run by clinicians that don't know business. As behavior analysts, we often look at how human behavior works, but a business has its own behavior. It has its own way of working, and we're not actually learning it before we jump into it. We're like, oh, I'm in a BCBA. I can figure out how this works. It'd be like a heart doctor going and trying to run a business of an automotive shop. Just doesn't work. You got to study the field you're in. So I wanted to address like a lot of the venting and the frustration I've seen because not even those pieces, the other piece is the whole burnout thing. And we can talk about that another time of like, where is that burnout coming from? And these are just the things I've been thinking of. But how do I set my rates? Let's go to something of what I look at in any time you want to change a habit. This is how I'm applying behavior analysis within my methodology. And there's three pieces, okay? The first one is you first need to learn your person. Now, learn your person could mean a lot of different things. I'll go into that. And then you have marry the pieces. I know, just hitch them together. You're like, what pieces? What are we marrying? I'll get there. And then the third one is morph for progress or pivot for progress, however you want to call it. And if you don't do any one of these pieces or something's not working, one of these pieces is off. You're either not changing, you're either not you don't have the right pieces, they're not even married appropriately, they're illegal out there, or you don't actually know your person. So, let's look at it when you say, "How do I set my rates?" I think the first thing is you don't know your person. When you say set my rates, you're looking at a teeny tiny piece. There's only one piece that goes into marrying the pieces. And then you might say, well, what are the pieces? Well, my question would be, what's your point? What are you getting these rates for? Why do you think, or I think we can all bring something different and unique to the world. What, instead of why, what is it that you are bringing as a clinician into the business field? And then how are you going to start using OBM? Because if you're a BCBA and coming from the clinical world of ABA, do you know how to do OBM? Because that's what you're going to have to do. That's only one piece, though. Technically, in all the business pieces, you have the body parts, right? Learn your person. If you're going to learn the body parts of your business, and then you have to learn you. And those are the two main pieces that have to be married conceptually in the ideas piece. And that's what you need to implement to move it forward. And then you need to morph, because if it's not working, we all know, change something. But a lot of times there's another thing I keep seeing in the field, and people go, what's the research say? You know what, guys? We're never going to have enough research for everything. And often your answer is literally right in front of you. Or go talk to somebody who's been in the field you are learning, like business people, not ABA people. You're asking all the wrong people. So we have people who don't know business asking people who don't know business how to run a business. It doesn't add up. It's like one animal, like a giraffe going to an elephant saying, how do you use your trunk? And they don't even have a trunk. But anyways, it's not a bad thing. It's just, I think the question of how to set my rates, you're missing you. Who are you? What is your value? I was talking to somebody once. They're like, oh yeah, I'm making this amount, out annual salary. And then they went into how many hours they worked. And I did the math and I was like, girl, you're making like $2 an hour. Like, is that what you're worth? Are you worth? Is what you bring to the world worth $2 an hour? There's a lot of ideas on how to price. So, first, know you as your person. It's like when I'm hiring babysitters and they're like, I want $25 an hour and I'm 18. I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm like, wait, you what? You what? I know people with a bachelor's degree and professional experience that don't even make $25 an hour. Like, know what you're actually worth. And sometimes you do have to start lower to get there, and that's okay. Or how are you explaining what you bring to the world? There's the levels of awareness that people need. So learn yourself and learn business. Don't don't just think because you're studying OBM, you know how to run a business. Do you know how to market? Do you know the behaviors that go into marketing? Do you know the behaviors that go into legal and operations? Do you know the behavior? Like, there's all these pieces. So the first part, when you're learning, you need to learn you. What are you bringing to the world? And I'll give you an example of my journey. I've not reached where I want to reach yet, but I'm on the way. And it started 5 years ago. If you had said what I wanted to do, I wanted to change the world. Okay, that's great. That's big ambition. Okay. What do you want to do? Oh, I don't know. Maybe OBM, maybe, help parents. Let's help parents. I had left the field because I was burnt out, the whole classic burnout of clinicians, because I had 20 cases in 2 offices, insufficient experience and support, didn't know what I was doing, I didn't know all this stuff. And I talk to other people and I can actually see in their verbal behavior what they're saying that they're lost to. I didn't really know where I was going. I just know I wanted to do something different. But I didn't know business. I didn't know. And so I left the field. And then I got the idea, why don't we help parents on the wait list? I was like, oh, this is great. So, I'm learning, in a sense, I'm learning the person, the 5 years of learning the person, learning the business, learning what I want to do, learning myself. And then I remember interviewing multiple times with ABA agencies saying, hey, I can help your parents on the wait list. And we'd literally have a 1 to 3 hour conversation. And then they'd be like, so do you want to be a regular clinical supervisor? I'm like, we just had how many conversations about the parents that need help that you can't get to? And they wouldn't hire me. It's like, okay, fine. So at the time, I spent 4 months trying to figure out what to do. And I kept coming back to, you're supposed to write a business plan. I don't know what the heck or how to do that. Are you kidding me? I don't know how to write a business plan. And it was extremely daunting. So then I tried transitioning into OBM. Couldn't do that because I didn't know how to explain what I could do in operational sense and in the business world, because there's a whole nother lingo. The problem with jumping from ABA, clinical ABA within the mental health space to outside is we're not given the words. We don't know what words we're supposed to, we're not educated in that. What is the terminology you need to be looking for? Like, for example, don't look for the word supervision. Don't put the supervision, put manager on your resume, not necessarily supervisor, depending on what you're looking for. I didn't know that at the time. And I would have conversations and I could see people look confused. Well, it's because I was confused. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was just throwing stuff out there. I'm like, I know I need to do something. I didn't learn me and I didn't learn business. Then I ended up just doing random contracts and I ended up getting experience I would have never had otherwise. And if I had started this and actually taken on clients 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to really help them. There's no way. So I needed to take that journey. It was a journey I didn't know I needed in order to be able to do what I'm doing and and morph a lot more for progress. It's not working. Let's morph it. Let's dig around for more pieces. Let's do the second part of, do I have the right pieces in place? So then, so that was about 5 years ago. I was all in and then I was like, okay, I'll take these contracts. Then I took these contracts. And then I was spending so much time on the contracts and I was still lost. I wasn't learning me or learning business. If you don't know where you're going, it's like, would you take an Uber and you don't know where to go? That's what it's like when you're going to pitch yourself. When you are lost and you don't know yourself, you need to learn yourself. If you're going into OBM, know where you want to go. That's why if anyone messages me about it, that's the first question. What do you want to do? Because if you don't know, you can't help anything. Now, you might not know and you might need life to get there. So I had gone through a life journey and I happened to subscribe to where you can call an attorney at any time. And this was about 3 years ago. And I got off the phone after just a couple questions with an attorney, realized I didn't necessarily need to go to court. I'm like, this is great. And I was like, why don't we have behaviorists that we could call and ask questions? Why doesn't it exist? If I had not gone through my life situation, I would have not been on a call with a lawyer, with an attorney like that, to then even have that question. So maybe you want to do something, but you need to take a journey first to get yourself into a situation that is going to be that light bulb moment. And that's where I first started looking in the direction of, why don't we have subscription-based services? They have it in all the other types of services. Why don't we have it in the behavioral field? And I've been finding a lot of people have been unsuccessful. I haven't figured out why, because I haven't been able to talk to those people yet. But I needed to learn me and I needed to have more pieces. Sometimes you don't have all of them. And I think that's where, when people say, how do I set my rates? Do you even have all your pieces together? The last thing people want to talk about, well, the first thing people want to talk about is probably the price. But what are they getting that's different? And people sell the same thing over and over and over. And somebody recently said, it's the same thing, just package it your way. And there's other pieces, like you could say set the rate according to everyone else. Well, there is no everyone else right now. There's not a lot of people setting their own rates in the sense of like free autonomy. Because the next question people often ask is, how do you set them with how do you do your rates with Medicaid and insurance? People are so worried about their funding that they forgot to look at their own value and the value of their clients. You're literally handling somebody else's life. Now, I'm not going to advocate for high or low prices at all, because that's you. You need to learn you and you need to learn your pieces, the pieces of your business. What do you bring to the world? I love how this one business, they're not an ABA business. They basically, I, in order to get an assessment for your kid to find out if they have any developmental delays or any neurodivergence or things like that, often you have to go to the hospital system and take like a year and a half to get on there, and then you may not get all the assessments they want. Well, this one company said, why don't we have assessments and treatment in one? Sounds great. Now, these are not run by behavior analysts. They're other other fields. But they said, we're going to not profit off the assessments, make them as cheap as possible, so not cheap. And then they also have a preliminary one where if you pay a couple hundred, you get a preliminary if there's potential red flags. And then you can decide to dive in and get the full assessment, and you can get it within a couple weeks. So why would you wait a year and a half? And you might say, well, I don't have the money for it. There's rich dad, poor dad. The poor person says, I can't. And the rich mindset talks about, well, how could I? That's where marrying your pieces come in. How could we make it possible? So if you say, how do I set my rates? Well, first, what are you bringing to the world? Who are you? Where are you going? Why are you wanting to even do this? And then what are the pieces that you have that are barriers versus not? Now, you might say Medicaid's a barrier. They don't pay enough. Yeah, they don't pay enough to float a business. That's literally what it boils down to. Uh, and you know what? Maybe you find a way around that. How can, if Medicaid is the way you want to go or insurance is the way you want to go, find a way to make it work. Barriers are pieces when we say, oh, but how do I do, or I can't. And I've talked about this in other episodes of like your own habit change. Because when you're doing a business, yeah, you can have the behavior principles of OBM and ABA and your clinical experience, but business is different. When you have a client that's not making progress, do you say, oh, they can't learn it? No. We're like, well, how do we help this kid learn it? We'll do that with your business. How could we set rates so that we're successful and we get to help other people? Maybe you have a sliding scale. Maybe you compare with other fields to do something similar and you do comparable rates. Maybe you have different tiers and some things are cheaper and some things cost more depending on what somebody is looking for. How do you want to do it? There's no perfect way. It depends on who you're serving. Those are the pieces you have to look at. There's not one answer. And I keep seeing in these Facebook groups, these clinicians, they're going on and they're asking the wrong question. They're saying, how do I set my rates instead of what can I do for you? And how can I make this work so I'm able to stay here and serve you? And it's not just the rate. People are forgetting their value. Now, when you're new, you may or may not have a lot of value in the sense of bringing something different. Maybe you're wicked smart and wicked good from the beginning. And I think all of us are always learning. None of us have ever arrived ever. But that's the consensus in our field. People are like, "Oh, I have my BCBA. I am the it now. I am it." But we're not. We're here to serve and we're here to always learn. And like 5 years ago, if you had told me I was going to be living in this situation now, doing what I'm doing now, continually morphing for progress, I don't know what I would have thought. I don't know if I would have believed you or thought you were crazy or like, okay, let's go. But how do I set my rates? It's not a bad question, but I think we're missing the three things. You're missing learning you and your business. That's learning the person. You're missing the pieces. You don't have enough of the pieces. Maybe instead of how do I set my rates, what do I need to know and what do I need to understand in order to know my options to set my rates? And just because you set them doesn't mean they're not going to change. That's where morphing for progress comes into play. You're like, well, no one's doing it. No one's willing to pay this amount, or it's not enough to float my business. Then that comes into your value in yourself and what you bring. If you know your stuff and you're competent, find a way it makes sense to other people. There's one aspect I've noticed different people do this. They will trade services for testimonials. I found that very helpful because then I hear from other people who are not behavior analysts. What do they get out of what I do? they're the whole point anyways. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people. I wouldn't be here if people didn't need other people to support in life. We talk about how kids raising a kid is, you need a village to raise a kid. Well, what about us grown-ups? And people say, suck it up. Well, yeah, you can to a degree. You do need to lasso your emotions because life is going to be a lot of dirt. So just get ready for it. But there's a lot of diamonds under it. But I think it's because we're asking the wrong questions. We're not learning the person appropriately in order. And if you ask the wrong questions, like close-ended questions, in the clinical world, we talk about the open and closed questions. If you ask a closed-ended questions, like, what should my rates be? End of story. Instead of, what do I need to understand? Or how can I better understand how pricing works, how finances work, how do money and businesses behave? That's also, in a sense, OBM. You're looking at how something other than a human is working. And OBM, it just evolved into ABA. It didn't come from ABA. Everything behaves. And I know we joke in the field that if a dead man can do it, it doesn't behave. But when you have money behaves, but by, in a sense, what its surroundings are what behave to move the money, right? The system. And if you want to set up a good company, there's three things. There's just three things you have to get right anyways. You got to learn yourself, obviously. Know that piece. But to run a good business, you need good leadership. Make sure your inflow and outflow match so you can legally pay the people you need to pay, take care of things, make sure they work, and then have a good system. It's not the employee that fails, it's the system that the leadership is supporting and implementing that the people fail. And the whole learning yourself, it does come down to your value. I remember somebody who they were doing house cleaning and they had a little one and they were married and they were supporting their family of three. Yeah, they were on the East Coast, so it wasn't like West Coast living costs, but still. And this person said, yeah, I do house cleaning for $10 an hour. That's their only job, and it's not full time. And I remember asking her, well, why are you doing that rate if you're really good, you're really fast, and you've been doing this for years? And she goes, I want it to be a service. And I love that it's a service. And I love the heart behind it. But what about your family? If you can't serve your family, why are you trying to serve the rest of the world? And I know other people, and I love to do things for service too and do things for free, but you also need to take care of yourself first or you can't keep showing up. Like, do you want to keep showing up? Do you want to help other people? You need to take care of yourself, your health, your sleep, the roof over your head, right? All of those pieces need to be taken care of. And if you set your rates, yeah, that question of how do I set my rates is valid, but it also demonstrates how you see your worth. Did you learn yourself? I know that's not grammatically right, but did you learn you? Did you learn what you're worth? And I'm not advocating for high or low. I just wanted to bring up this concept that I keep seeing people say, how do I set my rates and how do I deal with insurance instead of looking at how could I? Um, and I have somebody asking, the human race and business along with America are in negligence. And it's easy to see which business is bad by the roads around them and who goes in and out. And that's really, really true. The behaviors that people are engaging in, your internal state as a being, along will reflect into the business that you set up. And the customers, the clients, the people you're serving, they're the end result that get the impact of your own. Like if you're the leader and you're starting it, you're making that impact. And why do people keep coming and going is because the leaders are confused. The leaders and their values are played out into the business. So yeah, if you start with the question of how do I set my rates, what's your whole point anyways of why you're doing what you're doing? Don't you want to make a business that people don't want to leave? Don't you want to have the business that actually people want your services so much you got to hire and bring in more people to make that impact. Um, but yeah, and I'm talking about this more from a clinical perspective, just because uh, the whole point is to help give space to talk about how can we change as a field to do things better, whether you want to stay in the mental health field and be, help in that way. And no matter what professional field you're coming from, your external actions, which would be creating your business, running your business, are directly affected from what's on the inside. And I know even in my own journey, if you had asked me what I do, or I got so confused at telling people what I do, I used to just be like, "Oh yeah, I just play hide and seek with kids." I teach them to play. That's what we do, and to talk, and that's what we do. But because I didn't know how to explain it. And I even had a phone call the other day. I was like, "Wait a minute, maybe I still don't know how to explain it in a way that makes sense to other people." But yeah, that's why I keep talking about learn the person. So whether it's a business, whether it is the service that you're doing, whether you want to change your own habits, because in the field of organizational behavior management, the habits are the system of the company. Those are systems. When it repeats over and over, is a habit. So you're looking at changing the habits, and you're looking at changing the employees and benefiting them and empowering them to do what they need to do. But if you don't know what you want as a leader, or even as an employee, like I had somebody say once, I just love supporting the ideas to help me move forward. And the fact that that person knew that about themselves, I would want someone like that on my team. If I'm wanting to like create an idea, I need somebody that's going to help support me in that, not somebody that's going to try to overhaul it. And a lot of people like to give their own opinion. All over Facebook, people are like just giving their opinions, like my kid or in my business. I'm like, but isn't there more to it? You need to learn the person, and you need to learn the questions to ask, because that's going to bring you your pieces so that you can marry the right pieces together in order to make the change. And then be okay with morphing for progress. Like when I started 5 years ago, yeah, I never planned live streaming. I never, and even now people are like, you don't have an audience. I'm like, you know what? I like being there with people and being there. So that fits me. And so I'm just going to go with it. And that's okay. Um, to go with what works for you, because ultimately you have to be the one showing up and enjoying what you're doing. And if you're just doing it because everyone says to do it, oh, set your rates because they do this, or do it this way because this is the regular way of doing it, are you going to look back at your dots of the actions that you did in your business and be proud of what you did? Be thankful for what you did? Maybe, maybe not, because you did it the way everyone else wanted you to. So I know this is a little more theoretical in thinking. And it was more of just because that one question came up. How do I set my rates when you're starting a business? And it goes back to the three core. Again, learn your person, marry the pieces and the right pieces so that you have the right information that you're putting together in order to actually be effective in making something happen. And then you want to morph for progress, because just because it's not working, you might say, well, I set the wrong rates. I need to be able to pay everyone. Up your rates. There's even a concept where you stay low, and then once you get too many clients, you up your prices so that it decreases the demand. You have to balance it out, and you have to find that balance. There is no magic wand. This is how you do it. So I hope this helps pivot a little bit the question of how do I set my rates, to look at it at a bigger perspective. But feel free to send me questions. And if I didn't get to your questions, I'm happy to make a post about it. And you can find me on hspero.show on all my socials. And then right now, you can find me on my coaching website, esperosolution.com. And I'd love to hear from you. Again, I have another show at 2 later today for parents and the neurodiverse for any behavior question you might have. And that's 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So I'll be back in just a little bit. Got to take a break, right? You don't want to hear me all day. And hopefully, I'll see you guys again soon on next Tuesday at noon Mountain Standard Time. Bye.